Welcome back to the Cyber Resilience Brief, a Safe Breach podcast. I'm your host, Tova Dvorin, and joining me today is my co-host and our resident expert on all things offensive cybersecurity, Adrian Culley. Adrian, it feels like the regulatory landscape is shifting faster than the threats themselves lately.
It certainly is, Tova. Between NIS2, DORA, and the EU Cyber Resilience Act, CRA, we're seeing a massive pivot from optional security to mandatory resilience. The CRA specifically is a game changer because it moves the focus from the organisation to the product itself.
Exactly, Adrian. We've been diving into some recent research on the CRA, and the implications are staggering. Now, this officially entered into force on December 10th, 2024, and while the main obligations kick in on December 11th, 2027, the clock is already ticking.
Right, and let's be clear, this isn't just an EU, European Union problem. If you manufacture or sell digital products in the European market, regardless of where your headquarters are, the CRA is now your reality. Today, we're going to break down what our digging into this has told us, and more importantly, how tools like breach and attack simulation, BAS, continuous automated red teaming, CART, and adversarial exposure validation, AEV, are the only way to keep up.
Let's start with the who and the what. Our research mentions a term we're going to hear a lot, products with digital elements, or PDEs.
It's a broad net, Tova. A PDE is essentially any software or hardware product and its remote data processing solutions. This includes components that are sold separately.
The categories that fall into this are vast. That's consumer devices. It's everything from smart TVs and connected cameras to refrigerators and smartwatches. IT infrastructure, operating systems, firewalls, and network management tools. Software, your everyday desktop and mobile apps, but also your critical stuff like antivirus and password managers, and industrial IoT, IIoT. Those are the sensors and controllers that keep factories running.
Tova, don't forget the economic operators. The Cyber Resilience Act doesn't just target the original manufacturer, it hits importers bringing products from third countries in the EU and distributors who make these products available. Even if an importer just puts their brand on a product made by someone else, they're legally considered to be a manufacturer under the CRA.
Yes, but I understand there are also some notable exclusions.
There are, very specifically, medical devices, aviation products, and motor vehicles are excluded, largely because they're already covered by other stringent sector-specific regulations. National security and defence products are also out of the remit of the CRA.
And we'll be right back.
Okay, so if you are a manufacturer in scope, what is the EU actually asking you to do?
Here we get to mirroring the continual requirements in DORA. The core philosophy of CRA is cybersecurity by design and by default. You can't just bolt on security at the end of the development life cycle anymore. It has to be there from the start. We're moving from, as we always should have been, people trying to scatter cybersecurity on as magic dust post-deployment at the end of the manufacturing, at the end of their installation of the software, to cybersecurity being required as a golden thread woven into the product. Cybersecurity by design and default.
Absolutely. And lifecycle support is a huge part of this too. Our research says that manufacturers have to provide security updates for a defined support period, generally around 5 years.
It's a massive operational shift. You also have vulnerability handling. You must identify, document, and address vulnerabilities throughout the product's life. Reporting obligations. This is the one that keeps CISOs up at night. You have to report actively exploited vulnerabilities and security incidents without undue delay. Conformity assessments. Many products will need a conformity assessment with a CE marking to prove that they meet these standards.
Right, and this is where it gets interesting for us at Safe Breach. How does an organization actually prove that they are doing this continuously?
That's the $1 billion or the €1 billion question, Tova. Traditional penetration testing is a snapshot in time. The CRA requires continuous resilience. This is where breach and attack simulation comes in.
Right. Now, I know we've talked about BAS throughout the podcast, but it's actually becoming not as common of a term. So could you just explain in brief for our listeners who might not be as familiar?
So BAS allows you to safely and consistently simulate the exact tactics, techniques, and procedures that attackers use. Under the CRA, you are required to identify and address vulnerabilities. If you're only testing once a year, you're non-compliant the moment a new exploit drops on day 2. BAS automates that validation.
And what about continuous automated red teaming, or CART?
So CART takes it a step further, Tova. While BAS is great for validating controls, CART mimics the adversary mindset across your entire environment. It's about finding those hidden paths an attacker might take to reach your PDEs back-end data processing solutions. The research shows that remote data processing solutions are part of the PDE scope. If your cloud back-end is weak, your secure hardware is a moot point. CART finds those links.
Yeah, and we've also been talking a lot about Adversarial Exposure Validation, or AEV, lately. How does that fit into the CRA framework?
So this is really fascinating. AEV becomes the oracle, the truth teller. The CRA requires manufacturers to conduct risk assessments. Adversary exposure validation doesn't just tell you that a vulnerability exists, it validates whether that vulnerability is actually exploitable in your specific environment. Does it matter? You can't boil the ocean. AEV lets you focus on what actually matters.
And that helps with the reporting obligations that we mentioned as well.
Exactly. If the CRA says you must report actively exploited vulnerabilities, you need a way to know what's exploitable before the bad guys do. AEV provides that continuous validation of your exposure. It helps you prioritize. If you have 1,000 vulnerabilities, but AEV shows only 5 are reachable via an adversarial path, you know exactly where to put your resources to remain compliant.
And we'll be right back.
Adrian, we mentioned DORA at the start of the episode, and we also have recorded an episode on TIBER. If you're listening to this and the TIBER episode is listed, go back and take a listen before continuing. How does the EU Cyber Resilience Act connect to DORA and TIBER? Is this the next evolution of them? Is this something different? Tell me a little about that.
Thank you, Tova. That's a great question. If you view DORA as being the cornerstone of all of this and the core thinking around cyber resilience and requiring it to be continuous, from the EU legislators and decision makers and politicians' point of view, was originally embedded in DORA. What we now have is, between NIS2, the Cyber Resilience Act forthcoming, and then in terms of penetration testing, TIBER as a practical framework, what we have is taking those principles from DORA, which was only aimed, you'll all remember, at financial entities and their supporting businesses. The CRA now expands that across other regulated businesses, other manufacturers. So it's the original intent of DORA now expanding across industry. And we're likely to see over the next 2 to 3 years this continuing, a snowball effect, until we get to a point where government and industry all have these same continual testing, continual risk exposure requirements being made of them. And it's all for sound good reason.
We see a trend of an understanding finally that wait and see isn't an option anymore. This is a wake-up call for anyone in the digital supply chain.
100%, Tova. Hack yourself. Be the bad guy. Find out before somebody else tells you. This is a key point. It's, as we mentioned at the start, we've moved from nice to have to mandatory. The whole point of embracing mandatory is we don't wait for anybody else to tell us. As per the Verizon report for nearly 15 years, you're 80% more likely to be told by a third party you've been breached than you are to find it yourself. The whole point of all this emerging legislation and regulation is that's no longer acceptable. You need to take responsibility and stop yourself from being hacked. And the best form of defense is attack. And that's where BAS, CART and CTEM come into play.
Absolutely.
And if you're a manufacturer, porter or distributor, you need to start mapping your products to these CRA requirements now. The fines for non-compliance are expected to be significant, but the reputational damage of a recalled product is going to be even worse. And there will be recall products under the CRA. This is where it differentiates again from DORA.
Right, and we'll be sure to cover those as they come out. Adrian, thank you so much for this incredibly insightful session. For our listeners, we've summarized some of the key PDE categories and obligations in our show notes.
And if you're wondering how to start automating this resilience, look at your current testing cadence. If it's not continuous, it's not CRA-ready. And remember, automatic is not congruent with continuous.
Absolutely, Adrian. Listeners, thanks for joining us. We'll see you the next time on the Cyber Resilience Brief.
Stay safe with SafeBreach.
The Cyber Resilience Brief is a SafeBreach podcast. Executive produced by Adrian Culley and Tova Dvorin. Music produced by Sarah Dressner. hosted, edited, and compiled on Riverside. For more about SafeBreach and how you can validate your security controls across your entire IT infrastructure, visit us at www.safebreach.com. That's www.safebeach.com.